Okay, the reading for this week is the next part in our series on pre-modern, medieval, early modern, and Meiji period Japanese civilization, culture, society, and so forth. Today we will be reading excerpts from Hagakure, this famous work from the early 18th century, often translated as In the Shadow of Leaves. And today there are two PDF worksheets that we'll be using. I'll combine them into a single video. I'll put the links to those PDF worksheets in the description below. As always, they were compiled by somebody at Columbia University, and they used excerpts from this translation, the first of which is included in Sources of Japanese Tradition, edited by William Theodore de Barry, Carol Gluck, Arthur Tiedemann, Volume 2. I'll put the link to that book below in the description. And the second excerpt that we'll be reading is taken straight from the translation by William Scott Wilson in his book Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai, which came out in 1992. I'll put the links to all this stuff in below. Okay, so here are the two longer excerpts from this work, Hagakure, In the Shadow of Leaves. I'll start with the introduction here on the first worksheet. In Hagakure, or In the Shadow of Leaves, has come to be known as a foundational text of Bushido, underline Bushido, the way of the warrior, dictated between 1709 and 1716. Okay, so note that we're right in the middle of, or the end of the first half of the Tokugawa period. Memorize the dates of the Tokugawa period and all Japanese major periods if you haven't done so already. I'll put those in the description below as always. So this was dictated between 1709 and 1716 by a retired samurai named Yamamoto Tsunetomo, who died in 1719, just a few years after this last dictation. So he dictated these to a young retainer of his named Tashiro Tsuramoto. Hagakure was less a rigorous philosophical exposition than a spirited reflection of a seasoned warrior. Alright, seasoned warrior, 1659 to 17. Okay, so he lived during the Edo period. I don't know how he could have been a seasoned warrior living in the years he did. That might be a mistake there, right? Because obviously the author of this work, Yamamoto Tsunetomo, is living during a time of peace, right? This is during the Pax Tokugawa. So we'll have to look into this, see how much warfare he actually experienced in life. I imagine it was none at all. But we'll look at this in class. Although it became well known in the 1930s, when a generation of nationalists embraced the supposed spirit of Bushido, Hagakure was not widely circulated in the Tokugawa period beyond Saga domain on the southern island of Kyushu, Yamamoto Tsunetomo's home. Okay, so keep in mind that this work was not an important work during the Tokugawa period. Nobody read it really, and the idea of Bushido was not really that important to Japanese of the Tokugawa period, right? They were concerned with other matters in this time of peace and relative stability. All right, excerpts from Hagakure. So here are the excerpts from the first worksheet. Let me read the 4 questions on the study guide first. Question number 1, what values does Yamamoto Tsunetomo consider most important for a warrior? Okay. Straightforward question. What values does he consider most important? Question number 2. What kind of education do you think the author of Hagakure would have recommended for samurai? Okay, what sort of education is he recommending here for the Bushi class, who are at the top of the 4-tier hierarchy, Shi, no, Ko, Sho? This is written explicitly for members of the Bushi class. Question number 3. What philosophical or religious influence can you find in this text? Is this a Confucian perspective? Okay, is it a Neo-Confucian perspective? Keep in mind that Confucianism and Neo-Confucianism of the Song dynasty, which came into Japan, was very important in the Tokugawa period. And question number 4, how would you compare and contrast the model of samurai values presented in Hagakure with that outlined in Yamaga Soko's in establishing one's fundamental aim, which we've already read, right? Yamaga Soko, his treatise that we've read is intended for the Bushi class, but it has very different instructions for them. So how does this work compare with that one, which is basically a treatise on how the Bushi class members should behave in a time of peace when they are not required to engage in battle? How do you think samurai readers at the time would have felt about these two different texts? Okay, so imagine that you are a member of the Bushi class in the early 18th century. How would you respond to each text? All right, here is the passage now from the work. Excerpts from Hagakure in the Shadow of Leaves. I have found that the way, the Tao, of the samurai, the Bushi, is death. This is the famous passage, probably the most famous sentence in the whole work. I have found that the way of the samurai is death. This means that when you are compelled to choose between life and death, you must quickly choose death. There is nothing more to it than that. You just make up your mind and go forward. Shinigurui is the word that's used in the original, very important word in the context of Bushido. Dying crazily, right? Losing your mind in this pursuit of death. You must just make up your mind and go forward. The idea that to die without accomplishing your purpose is undignified and meaningless. Just dying like a dog is the pretentious Bushido of the city slickers of Kyoto and Osaka. Right, so he's writing against Bushi members like Yamaga Soko, who are teaching sort of rules for a time of peace. In short, he's saying that the intellectuals of the Bushi class have gone soft, and that we must retain our hardness and our preparedness for war, is what he's saying here. In a situation when you have to choose between life and death, there's no way to make sure that your purpose will be accomplished. All of us prefer life over death, and you can always find more reasons for choosing what you like over what you dislike. If you fail and you survive, you are a coward. This is a perilous situation to be in. If you fail and you die, people will say your death was meaningless or that you were crazy, but there will be no shame. Such is the power of the martial way. When every morning and every evening you die anew, constantly making yourself one with death, you will obtain freedom in the martial way, Bushido, and you will be able to fulfill your calling throughout your life without falling into error. A man of service, a hokonin, is a person who thinks fervently and intently of his Lord from the bottom of his heart and regards his Lord as more important than anything else. So this Confucian virtue of zhong, of loyalty, is paramount for him. This is to be a retainer of the highest type. You should be grateful to be born in a clan that has uji, that has established a glorious name for many generations and for the boundless favor received from the ancestors of that clan. And you should just throw away your body and mind in a single-minded devotion to the service of your Lord. On top of this, if you also have wisdom, arts, and skills, and make yourself useful in such ways as these permit, that is even better. However, even if a humble bloke who cannot make himself useful at all, who is clumsy and unskilled at everything, is determined to cherish his Lord fervently and exclusively, he can be a reliable retainer. The retainer who tries to make himself useful only in accordance with his wisdom and skills is of a lower order. Okay, then we skip a passage and go to the next passage. Bushido is nothing but charging forward, shinigurui, without hesitation unto death. And this is, again, we see this word shinigurui in the original. Underline this word. Bushi, charging forward without hesitation unto death, shinigurui. A Bushi in this state of mind is difficult to kill even if he is attacked by 20 or 30 people. This is what Lord Naoshige used to say too. And there's a note about Lord Naoshige, who lived during the Sengoku Jidai. It's Mitsushige's grandfather was a famous general and the founder of the daimyo house of the Saga no Kuni, the Saga domain in the province of Saga. He won great merit in Hideyoshi's Korean campaigns in the 1590s and was enfiefed by Ieyasu with the domain of Saga in 1601, as it says in the note there. Okay, so this is what Lord Naoshige used to say too. In a normal state of mind, you cannot accomplish a great task. You must become like a person crazed. Kichigai is the word in the original there, so which is kind of similar to shiniguri, a person crazed, kichigai, and throw yourself into it as if there were no turning back. Again, he used the word shiniguri. Moreover, in the way of the martial arts, as soon as discriminating thoughts, fumbetsu, arise, you will already have fallen behind. There is no need to think of loyalty and filial piety. Right? No need to think of zhong, loyalty, and filial piety, xiao, these two important Confucian virtues, right? Chugi in Japanese and oyakoko for filial piety in Japanese. In Bushido, there is nothing but shiniguri. All right, so he's saying in a sense, yes, these traditional Confucian virtues are important, but more important than that is this idea of shiniguri, which is kind of our own Japanese invention, right? So he's kind of setting himself apart from the continental tradition of Confucianism here. Loyalty and filial piety are already fully present on their own accord in the state of shiniguri, right? So loyalty and filial piety is assumed into this larger concept that he's putting forth here, this concept of shiniguri, right? And then the final paragraph on this first worksheet, there is really nothing other than the thought that is right before you at this very moment. Life is just a concatenation of one thought moment after another. If one truly realizes this, then there is nothing else to be in a hurry about, nothing else that one must seek. Living is just a matter of holding on to this thought moment right here and now and getting on with it. But everyone seems to forget this, seeking and grasping for this and that as if there was something somewhere else, but missing what is right here in front of our eyes, namely death, right? Ever-present possibility of death. Actually, it takes many years of practice and experience before one becomes able to stay with this present moment without drifting away. However, if you attain that state of mind just once, even if you cannot hold it for very long, you will find that you have a very different attitude toward life. For once you really understand that everything comes down to this one thought moment. Underline this thought moment. This is a key word in the whole text. The book, by the way, is about 100 pages in the English translation and about 80 pages in Japanese original in a Bunkobon edition that I have in my office. So we're reading only the more salient passages from it. It's kind of long and repetitive. It gets boring after a while. So we don't need to read the whole thing, but just keep in mind that this is part of a much larger work, essay, treatise. Different attitude to life. For once you understand that everything comes down to this one thought moment right here and now, you will know that there are not many things you need to be concerned about. All that we know of as loyalty and integrity are present completely in this one thought moment. And I think integrity here is the word jung, makoto in Japanese, right? So chugi and makoto. All that we know of as loyalty and integrity are present completely in this one thought moment. All right, that's the end of the first worksheet, and now we'll read the second one. And keep in mind that I've also done a longer video talk about the study guide that I made for this work. You can watch the study guide after watching this. I'll put the link to that below as well. All right, here's the second PDF worksheet. Excerpts from Hagakure on death. These are the salient passages from that work, namely the passages on death, on living in the moment, on the qualities of a good retainer, on speaking, on the teachings of Yamamoto Jing'emon. Right. So this PDF starts with an introduction, which I'll read here. After the unification of Japan in 1590, so at the end of the Sengoku period, and then the unification and the establishment of the Tokugawa Shogunate in 1600, which lasts all the way to 1868, you will remember, the samurai, or the warriors, the bushi, the shizoka, the warrior class, remained at the top of the social scale, right? This is the Confucian social scale, shi no ko sho, but had fewer and fewer chances to prove their valor in battle, right? So this is the Pax Tokugawa, the period of peace and stability, so they have few chances to prove their valor in battle. As opportunities to fight decreased and samurai were employed in peacetime government positions, more attention was given to the values that define their class. Okay, so in this new era of peace, what are we? Is what the samurai class was often asking themselves. What is our function? What is our purpose in life? What is our purpose in this new context of peace and stability? One of the most important was the loyalty samurai owed to the lord they served. In fact, the word samurai itself comes from a verb that means to serve, right? Saburao in the classical orthography of that verb. It originally means samurao, to serve. Kind of haberu, I think, is the same kanji for it. I'll check on that. The lord of or other high-ranking members of a clan often wrote out codes of behavior for the clan retainers. Right, so we've read some of these codes of behavior that were written by the merchant class in imitation of these bushi or samurai codes of behavior. Right, so they often wrote these codes out for their clan retainers. Among them, a work called the Hagakure, or Hidden Leaves. Kakure, right, is the kanji for it. Hagakure, hidden leaves. Ha is leaves. Kakure is to hide. So Hagakure has come to be seen as the one that best describes the Bushido, the way of the samurai. It was written in the early 18th century by a young samurai named Taishō. Okay, we've already read this. And his ideas were expressed in conversations with his young disciple, Yamamoto Tsunetomo. And so the resulting book is not a systematic code of rules, but some ideas are repeated often enough to be seen as essential to his thought. So as I mentioned before, this is a longer work and it's kind of repetitive, so these salient passages kind of convey the essence of his ideas. The selections below are grouped by theme. Okay. So here's the passage on death. And we've already read it, actually, so we don't need to read it again. This is the part, the way of the samurai is found in death. When it comes to either or, there is only the quick choice of death. Well, this is another translation, so let me read it to give you another sense and to emphasize what is in the original. The way of the samurai, the Bushido, is found in death. When it comes to either or, there is only the quick choice of death. It is not particularly difficult. Be determined and advance. To say that dying without reaching one's aim is to die a dog's death is the frivolous way of sophisticates. So this is the same passage we've read, just different translation. When pressed with the choice of life or death, it is not necessary to gain one's aim. Okay, so dying is the aim. We all want to live, and in large part we make our logic according to what we like, but not having attained our aim and continuing to live is cowardice. This is a thin, dangerous line. To die without gaining one's aim is a dog's death and fanaticism, but there's no shame in this. Right, so dog's death and fanaticism are not necessarily bad things. There's no shame in it. This is the substance of the way of the samurai. If by setting one's heart right every morning and evening, one is able to live as though his body were already dead, he gains freedom in the way. His whole life will be without blame, and he will succeed in his calling. Okay, so this is William Scott Wilson's translation that we're reading here. The first translation is a bit better, actually. I think there's some mistakes here. All right, but continuing. Living in the moment from the second chapter. There is surely nothing other than the single purpose of the present moment. A man's whole life is a succession of moment after moment. If one fully understands the present moment, there will be nothing else to do, nothing else to pursue. Live being true to the single purpose of the moment. Okay, so you can see kind of the influence of Zen and Zen ideas here in this stress of the present moment and the immediate present. Everyone lets the present moment slip by, then looks for it as though he thought it were somewhere else. No one seems to notice this fact. But grasping this firmly, one must pile experience upon experience, and once one has come to this understanding, he will be a different person from that point on, though he may not always bear it in mind. When one understands this settling into single-mindedness well, so single-mindedness is ichizu, I think, in the original, his affairs will thin out. Loyalty, jong or chugi in Japanese, is also contained within this single-mindedness. Okay, then, and then from chapter 11 on living in the moment, meditation on inevitable death should be performed daily. Every day when one's body and mind are at peace, one should meditate upon being ripped apart by arrows, rifles, spears, and swords, being carried away by surging waves, being thrown into the midst of a great fire, being struck by lightning, being shaken to death by a great earthquake, falling from 1,000-foot cliffs, dying of disease, or committing seppuku, ritual suicide, at the death of one's master. And every day, without fail, one should consider himself as dead. Okay, so live as though you had already died this violent death that you've been fantasizing and dreaming about, even though it's probably not going to happen in the present era because this is an era of peace. All right. There is a saying of the elders that goes, "Step from under the eaves and you're a dead man. Leave the gate and the enemy is waiting." This is not a matter of being careful. It is to consider oneself as dead beforehand. Okay. And the next theme is a good retainer. This is from chapter 11. He writes, Naka no Jin-e-mon constantly said, a person who serves when treated kindly by the master is not a retainer, but one who serves when the master is being heartless and unreasonable is a retainer. You should understand this principle well. Okay, so serve your master even if he is a cruel beast and abuses you. When Kaga no Kami Masamori was a page to the shogun, he was so headstrong that the shogun wished to test what was at the bottom of his heart. To do this, the shogun heated a pair of tongs and placed them in the hearth. Masamori's custom was to go to the other side of the hearth, take the tongs, and greet the master. This time, when he unsuspectingly picked up the tongs, his hands were immediately burned. As he did obeisance in his usual manner, however, the shogun quickly got up and took the tongs from him. And then from chapter 1, a man is a good retainer to the extent that he earnestly places importance in his master. This is the highest sort of retainer. If one is born into a prominent family that goes back for generations, it is sufficient to deeply consider the matter of obligation to one's ancestors, to lay down one's body and mind, and to earnestly esteem one's master. There should be an apostrophe there. That's the second time this typo has occurred. So add the apostrophe there to the ones. Esteem one's master. It is further good fortune if, more than this, one had wisdom and talent and can use them appropriately. But even a person who is good for nothing and exceedingly clumsy will be a reliable retainer if only he has the determination to think earnestly of his master. Having only wisdom and talent is the lowest tier of usefulness. And then from chapter 11, a certain general said, quote, for soldiers other than officers, if they would test their armor, they should test only the front. Furthermore, while ornamentation on armor is unnecessary, one should be very careful about the appearance of his helmet. It is something that accomplishes his head to the enemy's camp. Right. So again, this resignation to the fact that you're going to die. So living as and going into battle as if you are already dead is the way to fight properly. And then the next theme is on speaking from chapter 2. At times of great trouble or disaster, one word will suffice. At times of happiness, too, one word will be enough. And when meeting or talking with others, one word will do. Okay, so reticence and taciturnity is a virtue in his mind. One should think well and then speak. This is clear and firm, and one should learn it with no doubts. It is a matter of pouring forth one's whole effort and having the correct attitude previously. This is very difficult to explain, but is something that everyone should work on with his heart. That everyone should work on in his heart. If a person has not learned this in his heart, it is not likely that he will understand it. And from chapter 11 on speaking, the essentials of speaking are not speaking at all. If you think that you can finish something without speaking, finish it without saying a single word. If there is something that cannot be accomplished without speaking, one should speak with few words in a way that will accord with reason. To open one's mouth indiscriminately brings shame, and there are many times when people will turn their backs on such a person. Okay, so the bushi should not speak loquaciously and should choose his words very carefully and keep them few. And then the final section is the theme of the teachings of Yamamoto Jin-e-mon from chapter 11. These are the teachings of Yamamoto Jin-e-mon. Single-mindedness is all-powerful. Tether even a roasted chicken. Underline single-mindedness. This is a key word that appears throughout the whole treatise. I think it's ichizu in Japanese, but we'll check on that later. Single-mindedness is all-powerful. Tether even a roasted chicken. Continue to spur a running horse. A man who will criticize you openly carries no connivance. Right. So, continue to spur a running horse. This is an important metaphor. We'll discuss this in class. What does he mean by this? And he means to whatever you're doing, whatever task you're engaged in, take it to its final extreme. So it's advocating a kind of fanaticism and extremism. Right? A man who will criticize you openly carries no connivance. A man exists for a generation, but his name lasts to the end of time. Money is a thing that will be there when asked for. A good man is not so easily found. And that sounds strangely reminiscent of a passage from the Lungyu, the Analects of Confucius. You might have taken it straight from that. Walk with a real man 100 years and he'll tell you at least 7 lies. To ask when you already know is politeness. To ask when you don't know is the rule. Wrap your intentions in needles of pine. Okay, so hide your intentions is what it's saying here. Hide your true intentions. Never reveal them plainly, in plain sight. One should not open his mouth wide or yawn in front of another. Do this behind your fan or sleeve. And finally, a straw hat or helmet should be worn tilted toward the front. All right. And then we have, 7 study questions at the end, referring to these passages from the second worksheet that I just read. And let us go over these briefly and then discuss them in class. Question number 1. What did it mean to a samurai to live as though already dead? What does this mean to a samurai? How does it relate to, quote, being true to the single purpose of the moment? How would it help make a man brave? How would it help make him loyal? Let's discuss that later. Question 2. How does this samurai attitude toward death compare to the Buddhist doctrine of non-attachment, right? So this idea that shuchaku, or attachment, is a bad thing, and it's what keeps us in a state of suffering, and that if we can sever our attachments to the things of this world, we will attain enlightenment. How is that Buddhist idea borrowed and recast here in this essay? How do the ultimate goals of the two ways of thinking differ? Okay, so how are they similar, but how are their goals, their teleology, if you will, how do they differ? Question 3. Why is, quote, a person who serves when treated kindly by the master not a retainer? Okay, so remember he says that the true retainer is one who serves his master obediently even when the master is abusing him. What does this attitude tell you about the value of loyalty, of chugi, zhong in Chinese, as practiced by a retainer, as received by a master? How does the story of Hotta Masamori illustrate this lesson? Why are wisdom and talent the lowest tier of usefulness? All right, so wisdom and talent are not that important. Total loyalty, fidelity to even the abusive master is more important than wisdom and talent, and more useful. And question 4, why should soldiers test only the front of their armor? Why does it matter how the helmet looks when a dead warrior's head is brought back to the enemy camp, right? So honor and pride, and still looking strong and valiant is important even when your head has been decapitated and your head is sitting in the enemy camp. And question 5, does the emphasis on speaking seldom and using few words relate to the attitude toward death, the attitude toward single-mindedness? Discuss that. So how does this virtue of reticence and lacunity, if that's a word, taciturnity, if that's a word, how do these relate toward this idea of shinigurui and this idea of single-mindedness, ichizu? How is shame experienced? What connection does shame have with loyalty? So haji and chugi, how are these two ideas related? And finally, the last question, how do you explain the inclusion of matters of etiquette? One should not open his mouth wide, one should not yawn, and so forth, that we saw in those final passages. How do these relate to the way of the samurai? So these ideas of li, as we say in Chinese, of etiquette, of propriety, how are these related to the bushido? Similarly, how would you explain the inclusion of matters of dress? Okay, so propriety, etiquette, ritual, how do these relate to, these outer rituals relate to this idea of inner resignation toward death? Okay, we'll discuss all this later in more depth in class. I will see you then. Goodbye.